So this has been the keynote speech. I'd like to start the session number 1. From now on, we have many sessions, and each of the sessions is with the partner organization. The first partner organization for session number 1 is Korea Startup Forum. Our theme is the digital transformation and policy. So that is about the government's policy with the digital transformation. The agenda for this session is after the post-corona era, what kind of evolution will be made in the digital economy, what kind of risk and opportunity factors are there for the digital transformation, what kind of the cooperation is expected between the people, and also what is the definition of digital rights and privacy. So we have a lot of overreaching ideas and issues. We'd like to invite all the panelists of session number 1. So we have Mr. Choi Sung-jin, President of Korea Startup Forum, for the moderation, and we have Mr. Arvind Gupta, and we have Christophe Macris who are online, and we have Mr. Yoon Tae-sik of Ministry of Economy and Finance, and also we have Mr. An Hee-jae from Bain & Company. So Mr. Gupta, Mr. Macris, Mr. Yoon, and Mr. An are all here today. Now I'll give my microphone to Mr. Choi from Korea Startup Forum for the moderation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will be leading the first session on the digital transformation and policy in the post-COVID era. So we are joined by 4 distinguished panelists. I am Choi Sung-jin from Korea Startup Forum, who will be moderating today's session. And our session will be available both in English and in Korean. So please tune your channels for your interpretation. Yes, the topic of our today's session may seem a bit serious in a way, but with regards to this topic, the MC has briefed us on it, so we're going to skip that part, and I would like to introduce to you our panelists today. So we are joined by 4 distinguished panelists. 2 are joining us from abroad, and 2 are here with me physically on site. So first of all, Mr. Christos Makridis, who is the Digital Fellow at the MIT Sloan School of Management, and he is also the Senior Advisor at National AI Institute. He's also Professor at the Arizona University, and he's also a regular contributor to Forbes. So we cannot actually give a applause. So can you please wave us and wave to us and say hello? And next is Mr. Arvind Gupta, who is the co-founder of Digital India Foundation. He is also the Global Future Council member of the World Economic Forum, and he is also the CEO of MyGov India, which is Indian government's official national participation, public participation platform. So Mr. Gupta, are you here with us? Can you actually wave for the audience? Thank you very much. And from Korea, I would like to introduce our panelists. First is Mr. Yoon Tae-sik, who is the Director for Policy Coordination of Ministry of Economy and Finance. So he's in charge of the trade policy as well as development finance. And he also served as the representative or the spokesperson for the Ministry of Economy and Finance. And he's currently the Director for Policy Coordination. So the Ministry of Economy and Finance is also the host of today's forum and is also overseeing the innovative growth of the Korean economy. Please wave to the audience and also the panelists. And last but not least, we have Mr. An Hee-jae, who is the partner at the Bain & Company Korea. So Mr. An is actually an expert in the new growth engines, and he has served in very important positions in many different companies in charge of strategy and finance and planning, and he has led a lot of researches on startup as well. So thank you, Mr. An. So with that, we would like to kick off the panel discussion. And as I mentioned before, we're going to focus on the digital transformation and policy. So, with this COVID-19, digital transformation is seeing a lot of changes, and digital economy is seeing a lot of changes, and digital transformation is on top of agenda for many countries. So, when it comes to digital transformation, it has been led by startups like in the private sector, but nowadays you can see that the digital transformation is touching all parts of the society because it is required in every aspect of our society. So that is why the role of the public sector and the government is becoming increasingly more important. And so, although the topic of today's session is quite comprehensive and broad, I'm sure that our esteemed panelists will be able to provide some useful insights. So, my first question is addressed to Mr. Yoon Tae-sik and Mr. Gupta.
So let's talk about the public sector first. With Mr. Yoon and Mr. Gupta, please. Actually, when we talk about the public sector, what is public means they have all the implications of the people and the public that are involved in the implications of the policies. Therefore, impartiality is important, and also we have to think about those marginalized people who are digitally underprivileged. So there are difficulties arising from there as well for the government and the policyholders. However, after the outbreak of COVID-19, well, we know that it was very difficult beforehand, but we know now that it should be done from now on in the future. So what is your priority of having to do with the public sector? What is the most imminent thing that should be done in the public sector after COVID-19? Also, when we have the digital transformation, we know that there are some positive things, but at the same time, we might have some negative things as well, some worrisome outcomes as well. So what are your views on these mixing ideas? So let's start with Mr. Yoon first, and he will be followed by Mr. Gupta. Yes, thank you very much. Well, when we talk about the digital transformation in the public sector area, let me just explain some of my ideas. Recently, after the COVID-19, the acceleration has been made onto the policies of the digital transformation. So top priority should be decided where to put our efforts on first and what areas as well. So therefore, in order to improve the efficiency of the services, that kind of decision making is very important. So as of that, July this year, Korean government has made a framework action plan for the digital transformation. The idea is that we have to have a digital new deal to the acceleration. The second one is a low carbon and high green activities. And the third one is the safety net for the employment across the general public. So these are three pillars of our framework action plans. So digital transformation, which is our topic today, is included in the framework action plan of the digital new deal by the government. It has the section of digital new deal. AI sustainability improvement is the section called. So that includes all kinds of action plans by the government. So let me explain in three ways what the government has found out so far. So for your reference, the digital transformation in the public areas was having some difficulties, and it cannot be done overnight. So they have to be phase by phase foundation. So the first thing we have to do is to have the customized non-contact administration services provided to the people. With this acceleration of the services, we're going to have the acceleration of the non-contact services, and that it will be very important for the convenience of the people. For example, if we have complaints from the general public, we can use the mobile phones to receive their certification or identification cards digitally so that we can identify who they are. Also, for the welfare system, we have a lot of annuities and also the pensions for the recipients. Depending on the recipients, we can provide the customized services for the recipients in a very comprehensive website or web portal. In addition to that, we have a lot of other services in relation to public transportation and so on. So in Korea, when we have this digital transformation, our target is to have the 50% by 2025 and 80% by 2050. That is our goal to achieve. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the blockchain. Blockchain can be applied to the public services. The Korean government wants to put the top priority on the services where the sensitivity is very high and also the satisfaction can be very high. For example, redundancies can be reduced, and also the real estate transaction services can be combined together in order to reduce the redundancies, and also also we have some other areas where the sensitivities are very high for the general public. We'd like to have a test projects for that, and also after having the results we're going to expand the scale step by step. The third area we are interested in is the sharing platform of knowledge of the general public. It means that there anybody in Korea can have a very easy and simple access to get what they want to know. For example, science and technology, education, or academia have some reservoir by the government as a form of database so that people can have access to. So we are going to have a platform based off of the central library or university libraries and so on, so we can have partnership with those existing libraries as well. In addition to that, the Discharge Foundation should be further strengthened by the government. So we have two initiatives in relation to that. First one is to have the 5G nationwide network completed. By 2025, in the central government, we're going to have the 5G wireless network completed. After that, that will be further expanded to the rest of the country. And also cloud services will be further accelerated. By 2025, all the administration services, the offices, will have the 100% of cloud services according to their plans. In relation to that, I can add two more things that we can consider. One of the considerations is that when we have the digitalization of the public services, we have to think of the elderly and the marginalized and digitally underprivileged. We have to improve their capabilities as well. Also, secondly, we should not stop at the public services only, but we have to think of the cyber security as well. In the process of having the digitalization, we have to make sure that everything is secure and also safe. Without that, we cannot just move on to the next step as well. Therefore, the cyber security will be very important. It will be also top priority by the government. Thank you. You explained the digital new deal of Korean government. We will have some section to discuss that matter in more detail. Now, in the issue of public sector, now the microphone goes to Mr. Gupta, please. Now, I'd like to ask you to have a comment.
Thank you and good morning. Uh, it is during the COVID crisis, what we have seen that governments have had to act as startups themselves, be very, very agile, transform themselves digitally to deliver what they were traditionally never used to do. And it has been heartening that in India, the government was very well, took the response and became very agile, very fast. And to be able to do that, India has done something very, very different. India has created what is called the national digital identity. It's a biometrically verifiable digital identity which is given to every citizen of India today. And it is not just a digital identity, it is a digital stack. It's a platform which has more than 1 billion users. And it is a platform which is the only of its kind in the world, which is a public platform. Now, like governments used to build the electricity system and roads, and which are for public good, India's digital platform, which has three components to it, which is the identity, a paperless component, and a payment system, all interlinked with each other, is a public good, which basically means it is available to government, to startups, and to businesses. And that's why that discussion of how to understand India's digital stack is very relevant to all the three, four stakeholders in the digital economy. And that's number one. Number two, India's digital stack has been built bottom up. My colleague from Mr. Yoon from Korea explained that the important is to keep the elderly, the excluded into the system. So India's digital stack, the identity called the Aadhaar is built from bottom up, which means every single person in India has access, even if they're not on an internet connection. That means they can go on an assisted mode to a offline center and still get access to all government services. And what is very relevant during the pandemic, what the government has done is, has used and extended the use of this digital platform for doing what is called direct benefits transfer. And and really offer governance as a service, completely contactless. Because with a digital identity now, you can verify yourself in a contactless manner, in a presenceless manner. What is the authentication for a digital identity? It's your fingerprints and your iris. Iris is contactless. You don't even need to touch a device. So with that, the government has really transformed the way it gives out schemes and welfare. And let me tell you that Indian government has been able to give out over the last 2 years something called the direct benefits transfer, almost 150 billion US dollars of public welfare and aid, and of which our studies have shown that we have saved almost $20 billion dollars in wastage and leakages by ensuring that this money reaches directly into the citizens' accounts. And that's how at scale and at speed startups operate. And this DVD mechanism has ensured that the money is coming into the bank accounts, but on the second hand, it has this ability where you can actually withdraw money from anywhere. So both the money can come in directly into your bank account, but also you can withdraw money using the unified payments interface. The again, with no cards, nothing, authenticating using your either your mobile phone or your iris scans, and make payments by essential goods. And and um, and this mechanism was put to such great use during the pandemic, because when people were rendered without sources of income, the government intervened and transferred over $30 billion of immediate relief to the people who wanted it the most, and they were able to put the money to use to make sure that there's continuity in their sustenance and their livelihood. So um, in a short thing, I want to explain that the digital transformation in the government of India is based on, or in India, is based on a digital stack, which is a public good. Governments use it for benefits transfer. Startups use it. All startups in India, and even big companies like Facebook and WhatsApp and Google, front end the payment system of India. The UPI, which is part of the digital stack. We have today almost 60% of the population on the digital internet highway, but our systems are designed that people who are both on a smartphone and also not on a smartphone can avail the benefits of digital transformation, of governance, of benefits, and ultimately the government has opened up this platform for businesses, for startups. And today we imagine in the next 4 to 5 years, 20% of our economy will be a digital economy, and which is driven by AI, which is driven by data, which is driven by machine learning, IoT devices, and with the equal participation from all sections of the society.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. So the two panelists who just responded are either in charge of the policy in the public sector or leading the policy initiatives in the public sector. So in the process of digital transformation, there may be different issues that arise, and they mentioned out what kind of approaches that the public sector can adopt in addressing these issues. So from the India's perspective as well as from Korea's perspective. So since the talk was interesting, we're going to elaborate more on that later on. Now let us hear from the private sector, so the panelists joining us from the private sector. In fact, there may be a lot of issues that arise in the process of digital transformation, and we have to address these issues not only for public purposes, but also there are some issues that need to be addressed by the private sector as well. And up until now, the digital transformation has been led by the private sector. But as our previous two panelists said, in the process of digital transformation, there may be different conflicts or issues that arise. For example, digital divide is a prime example. And In Korea, it's in the morning. In India, it's early morning, and in the US, it's late at night. So we are all joined virtually, and we are leveraging the digital technology to have this kind of discussions. But some people actually have difficulty in joining these kind of discussions. And in Korea, because of the COVID-19, there was a lot of remote learning and that took place among children, but some children did not have access to technology, so they could actually not benefit from remote learning. And to give you an example of Southeast Asia, so there are a lot of people who've never visited banks, and 40% of the people in that region do not have access to a bank account. So of course, digital transformation can be a big market opportunity, but if it is accelerated, the digital divide may also be aggravated. It could be an educational divide, or a data divide, or asset divide. There may be different types of divides that can occur, so it can really polarize our society. So what kind of efforts can the private sector make? What kind of efforts can the market make in order to address these social companies? For this question, we will hear from Mr. Anije and Mr. Macredis. So first of all, Mr. An from Bain & Company. Thank you very much. So while going with digital transformation, everybody expected that there would be some kind of social conflicts. And if you look at Korea, there are stakeholders who are used to the existing business model, and there are startups with a new business model. So there was a conflict between the two parties. So overall, everybody, we actually did not think that we're all in this together. But if the digital transformation is accelerated, then more and more Korean people will become involved, and that will lead to more issues and conflicts. And the moderator mentioned about the marginalization and the digital divide and the data privacy issues. And out of all of these issues, I would like to touch upon a topic that would have a biggest impact. And I think I would like to talk about the income divide. So with the acceleration of digital transformation, I believe that the income divide will also be accelerated in a drastic manner. And first of all, so due to automation, so a lot of non-qualified work as well as a lot of the office work will be replaced by technology and robots. So low-income jobs will disappear, and the income level will go lower. If you look at the United States, this is my expectation, but there will be jobs. The jobs that are worth less than 30,000 US dollars will disappear by 20%. But the jobs that earn more than 100,000 US dollars will not be impacted that much. So as the digital transformation will be accelerated in the next 5 to 10 years, the low-income jobs or employment may disappear or decline, and that will also aggravate the income divide. And another important aspect is that the way we create added value was very much income-driven in the past, but now it will be more capital-driven. So with increased automation and increased productivity, so our Bain & Company, we believe that that will lead to 30% improvement in productivity. So from the business perspective, that will be more net income for 10% more. However, the wages will be drastically reduced. So a lot of the labor pool will be reduced, but the profit that will be generated by investing in capital will be increased. So this situation or trend will also aggravate the income disparity or divide as well. But income disparity, of course, can cause social conflicts and concerns. But in the long term, since I'm a consultant, from an economic perspective, it will reduce the domestic consumption, and it will also actually not sufficiently provide the resources that we need. So economically speaking, it will also have a negative impact. So in order to minimize and prevent this, I believe that there are two viable options or directions. So we can actually slow down the acceleration of the digital transformation and address the social conflicts that arise on the way one by one. For example, the low-income earners can get a digital transformation system, transformation training to become integrated in this process. But another option is to accelerate the digital transformation. But all the profits generated from the increased productivity can be used to address the different types of divides and disparity. But since I'm in the private sector, I don't think that the first option is a viable one. And if we actually become averse to or ignore the opportunities where we can improve 30% of productivity gain, I don't think that that will be beneficial for companies to survive in this era. So in that situation, what kind of consensus should be built in the Korean society? So somebody mentioned about the digital New Deal, but we have to accelerate the digital transformation, and all the profits that are generated from the productivity gains should be used effectively and efficiently.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
문제
Regarding the job issue, he has given us his ideas. We'll come back to the job creation issue later on. Now, going back to the digital transformation, there can be other issues that are expected and what kind of solutions can be given by the private sector. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. McCurtis for his remark.
I just want to say thank you again. It's an honor to be here. And so let me start with the philosophical point first, that we need to remember that technology is never bad or good. It's out there. It's out there to be used. And it's really up to us as individuals, as policymakers, as business leaders to leverage technology to advance human welfare. And so we see how AI can be used to detect cancer very early, but we also see how facial recognition software can be used to persecute religious minorities. So understanding that technology is out there and something to be used and really stewarded, I think, is a very important starting point here. And so my view is that we're going to see a lot of structural transformation within the developed countries and also developing countries. And in particular, a lot of the industries that we even see today are new. We didn't see social media 15, 20 years ago. We didn't see the proliferation of all these personalized educational services, Coursera, edX, DataCamp, and so on. And so a lot of the innovation that we're seeing is fundamentally new industries that are entering into the marketplace. And that's causing, as we were just talking about, it's causing some disruption because individuals in those industries now need to either acquire new skills or they need to switch industries. But it also creates a lot of opportunity to learn and really advance as a society and as civilizations. And so we need to ultimately understand how to empower individuals with these technologies that are being created. And so let me give a really quick example with what Arizona State University is doing, for example. One of the colleges at ASU is called Ed Plus, and it's, I think, the largest online component of the educational services sphere in the United States. And they're using AI to help individuals learn faster and more effectively. And so just as we were talking about right now with all the disruption that's happening, we also have people able to learn faster than ever before. Because remember, you can open up your phone and learn basically anything that you want to by going on YouTube, by going on Coursera and all these different platforms. So we don't want to forget that there's also these new opportunities to acquire new skills. There's also going to be a lot of disruption, and we were just talking about this 5 minutes ago, is that a lot of the routine, lower skilled work is going to be displaced through automation or AI, particularly the manual and routine types of tasks. But one of the areas that I'm just going to give a quick example. One of the areas where I think we're going to see a lot of beautiful innovation is how new technological platforms might be able to help us interact with society more seamlessly. So when Peter Diamandis, for example, was talking about how we can use AI to optimize our health or use AI to optimize the way that we learn, one of the companies that I'm really excited to advise in the private sector is a company called Attention Live, ATTN.live. And the idea behind it is, well, you've got your phone, and when you're streaming content, what if you could just push out video content simultaneously across platforms using your voice instead of using your hands? And so whereas a lot of individuals in society and students when they're in school might sometimes be intimidated by programming, by certain areas of STEM, these sorts of technologies that democratize learning, allowing us to use our voice instead of just using programming with our hands, can be very empowering. And so I guess what I just want to kind of leave off on in response to this first question is there is a lot of disruption, and I think the answers that we've heard so far today are just saying that yes, technology has a downside sometimes, but it also creates a lot of opportunities for personal growth and growth as a civilization. And it's really up to us, and in particular entrepreneurs, to make that value proposition and show people that there's a better way forward.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. That was very impressive and insightful comment. Technology, that is something in presence, in reality, and we have to think about how we can just evolve them into something that is being more creative in the future. So we have to move forward to the era where we have to utilize such existing technologies for the betterment of the society. Now, I talked about the job issues. I promised that I'm going back to the job issues, right? So we will be talking about the job creation condition. Let's start with Korea first, to be followed by the international conditions. As I said before, in Korea, the government has announced a digital New Deal policy. Now I know that the implementation is underway. And also according to the data, about 900,000 jobs will be newly created by the government as announced. But that doesn't mean that there are not jobs that are disappearing, because people are worried about the jobs that might lose in the future. So in this process of digital transformation, maybe these new 900 jobs are the ones temporarily needed in the process of transformation only. On the other hand, other people are also worried that even though the new jobs are created, the existing jobs will be just gone away, and they will just take up more jobs disappearing than the ones being created. So that's another part of the worries. So let's start with the bad news first in this session. I'm worried about the bad news coming before the good news, but I'm doing this on purpose because we have to think of the conditions of all the audience and participants here, and these participants here today are having some kind of consensus that we have to move forward in a positive manner, even though our conditions have some negative aspects as well. And also we are airing the issues to the rest of the public as well, so this forum can be watched by all the general public, and their concerns should be resolved as well. Therefore, we'd like to have a question regarding this job creation or disappearance issue as well. Let's start with Korean government first. My question is that people are worried about the jobs lost rather than the jobs created. So is that the reality? That's my question. Is it the really happening thing? And also for these people who are losing or will be losing their jobs, although new jobs are created, what about the conditions of these people who are losing jobs? What kind of policy measures are prepared by the government for the people who are losing jobs? Mr. Yoon first. Yes, thank you. You talked about the possibility of having the job lost, and that is the reality we cannot deny. As mentioned before, the low productivity or simple manual jobs or simple service jobs can be disappearing. But I'd like to emphasize two things here. First, in the digital economy, it is related to global economy and also related to the individual economy as well. So that is something that is indispensable or inevitable in the future. What we have to discuss here is that how we can adapt ourselves to that, how we can minimize the impact on the marginalized. So we have to focus our attention on these dealings first, because we understand or agree that this is the way forward that cannot be denied. Second thing I'd like to say is that I know that the jobs will be disappearing in some part. However, absolutely speaking, the number of jobs created will exceed the jobs lost. So in the process of having the new policies implemented, we have a lot of ways to make up for the jobs lost. In relation to that, I'd like to give you some examples. As of the end of June this year, there is a statistics regarding the jobs created by the venture companies. Last year, they had 640,000 jobs created, and as of end of June this year, we have these 670,000. Last year, there was the 640,000. So we have net increase of 30,000 in relation to the venture companies. That is something that we can refer to as net increase. Second, about the digital New Deal policy, our moderators said that by 2025, we are going to use 900,000 jobs by having the investment of the 500 billion won. And also, in relation to that, we have direct impact and indirect impact, but most of these impacts will be coming from indirect investment as well. So it means that in direct aftermath of having the new businesses in private sector will be incorporated into the job of 900,000 created. The reason is that we can have the new services that have greater impact onto the society, creating more jobs compared to the 5 years ago and now. Back in 5 years ago, we didn't expect or imagine any new products that we do have now. So there must have been made a lot of jobs so far. Fast forward in the future, after 5 years, we will have some jobs that can not be imagined now, but with new products and services that we don't have at the moment. So in the process of having the implementation of the policies for the decade or 2 decades, we have a lot of good examples of having the new jobs created that can never been imagined before. So we are very optimistic about the future as well. So let's talk about the government policies in 3 ways. First one we have to do or we can do is the deregulation. In order for the market to be created, deregulation is really important. One of the examples we are doing is regulatory sandbox. This system is to encourage new businesses in new areas to create new jobs. Regulatory sandbox, as you might know very well, is to have a test period for some time without the regulations or a grace period of the regulations. So the regulatory sandbox is something that the government will be using very actively and that will testify the safety and effectiveness of new businesses. If they are proven to be that way, their licenses can be accelerated. And second thing the government should do very essentially is that, as mentioned by many panelists, is to help the livelihood of the marginalized in the society. For example, we can help them to have the better livelihood, and also for the mom and pop store jobs, they can be transferred into something digital in their businesses as well. For example, even though they are having the brick and mortar businesses, if they're retired, we can give them additional lifetime education for transforming themselves into something digital businesses. And also for the market businesses, traditional market owners and also the shop owners can be transformed into the online business owners as well to increase their revenues. Digital capabilities can be trained for them, or consulting business can be also given to them for their business growth. That is something the government can do and should do. Thank you very much. We have great panelists today, so we're very pleased to have their insights. So I cannot be a great timekeeper. So I am a very bad timekeeper today, so I have only 20 minutes left. So I'll be accelerating my session here. So when we talk about Korea situation, I wanted to hear from Mr. An now, but let's just have his session, have his time prepared later when I have combination of with other question. So regarding job business, can we just hear from other countries now? So I'd like to invite Mr. Markpreet or Mr. Gupta to talk about the issues of the job creation or job disappearance. Anybody volunteering from you guys?
네, 그 미스터 마크리디스한테 한번
I'd be happy to, and Arvind, feel free to jump in. I'll be quick. Let me give two examples from the United States context that show, I think, what's possible, and a lot of what was just spoken about the regulatory sandbox really resonated with me. So in the United States over the past 3 years, one of the initiatives that's been championed is something called the National Council for the American Worker. And the goal here was to modernize the way that workforce development is done. So instead of just giving money for short-term programs where somebody might be unemployed and then they go in and they take a class for 6 hours, the idea behind the National Council for the American Worker is very different. In particular, it has two key features. First, it's important to have what's called a skill taxonomy. That means that employers and employees are using a common language to define the skills that are needed. And this can be represented digitally using what are called skill clusters. So it can be as simple as saying for programming, listing all the different languages, but it can become a lot more complex based on the type of job that is being requested. So skill taxonomy is part one. Part two is being able to create a digital credential. And this is very related with something that Arvind mentioned earlier that India is doing. So I don't want to belabor this point, and he's probably going to jump in about this. But when you combine a taxonomy of skills with a way of publicly signaling your competency at those skills, it enables employers and employees to more effectively match in a labor market, and for workers to have an incentive to learn something new. Because what you wouldn't want is if you're a worker, you learn something new and there's no way to signal it to employers. But such a credential allows you to do that. The last point that I want to make is just that there's some very unique collaborative relationships that are taking place in the United States. I serve on something called the National Artificial Intelligence Institute. And in addition to just research and development grants that are targeted towards technologies that are promising, in particular AI. One of the things that we're doing is partnering with researchers in universities in the private sector and then using administrative data to work with them to come up with innovative solutions. So it can be like in the Department of Veterans Affairs, using medical history data to help veterans optimize their health and well-being so that you can inform somebody that if you have this condition, then maybe you don't want to eat this, and this. It's just giving people recommendations using a very big data sort of approach. So all in all, I think that this digital taxonomy approach coupled with innovative public partnerships is a very exciting thing to see. But I'll turn it over to you, Arvind.
Yeah, thank you. I think I want to just add 2 or 3 very quick points because we are short of time and I can see the clock ticking. Number one is that the digital job loss is going to be different in different countries. Countries like India, more developing countries, parts of Africa, Latin America, will see less job loss because they will start gaining from net gaining from the digitization of the supply chains, logistics, and the integration of the offline world with the online world. My colleague from Korea mentioned how the small shops can be digitized and really use this integration in the startup community, which is called online to offline integration. So, but as we say that, and as a professor, I can say there's a second part, which is the 4D rule. There will be job losses. Anything that is duplicate, dangerous, dirty, and dangerous will be automated. And when that automation happens, you have to reskill. And in that reskilling, creating this national skills database tied to a digital identity is a very important, both a startup problem to be solved and a policy problem to be solved. And I want to just quickly give the last example is that India, created 400 million bank accounts using digital technologies. This India stack enabled 400 million new people to have a bank account today. And that's more than the population of the United States in less than 3 years. Now, why I mention that is because that has now given new jobs, new banks, startups, about 200,000 jobs in startups related to fintech, about 2 million jobs created servicing this new class of people who were otherwise excluded from the financial world and the banking world. So I think there is a lot of green shoots, a lot of new benefits that will come. Of course, there will be some jobs that will be lost. They will require reskilling, and but net, we believe that there will be net new jobs created in countries which are more developing, have scope for improvements, and fast public policy responses. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. That was a very important idea, and it was a very welcoming idea as well. As a part of Korea Startup Forum, I myself am involved in those kinds of activities. So one thing I would like to mention here is very agreeing with Mr. Gupta. As I mentioned before, earlier, they have startups policies for the Indian government, and any startup can join the work pool for the innovation, as mentioned by Mr. Gupta. So startups like mine are very proud to be the center of the innovation. So last year in the Digital Economic Forum, we talked about these issues very much. And also this year, with the COVID-19 issues and countermeasures, various types of startups, agile and fast enough, can make contribution to giving solutions to these issues. I'm very pleased to hear that all the panelists are agreeing with my conviction as well. Naturally, let's talk about the startups. We heard from what's happening in India, and also we heard from what's done by Korean government in the regulatory startups, and also we heard just a glimpse of what's happening in the US as well. Mr. An, as a private sector person, has been an ardent student of the startup business and innovation as well. Having said that, not only in Korea but also in the rest of the world regarding the startups, what kind of policies or strategies are needed? So what is your suggestion or recommendation for that? Yes, regarding the policies of the startups, we are tracing what's happening by the government every year. Some of the deregulations are happening on some of the businesses in the startup, and acceleration of the development is being made. So far, so good. But when we talk about the regulations or the further systems that we need in the future, having said that, today we have to focus our attention onto the COVID-19. And having said that, also we have a lot of small SME businesses who are stricken by the COVID-19 issues. For them, in order to have the ecosystem floating, you have to make an investment. Also, you have to make the reinvestment. However, there is a problem with Korean government helping reinvestment. So what can be done in that regard? I'll be very brief. In my personal experiences, what is missing in this policy of a startup is to have the left of the detailed policies for supporting the startups. Initial grants are okay, initial investments are good. However, statistically speaking, compared to last year, the startup volume is only taking 10% of the grants and investment onto the whole innovation. So the whole startup and venture business, in the case of the United States, the private sector involvement accounts for 50%. In other words, in Korea, we do not have that much of the flowing of money into the private sector startups. There must be a lot of battle-ups in Korea. According to the National Assembly, the corporate venture capital is being under consideration. What kind of freedom of degree will be given to that kind of new policies as well. If we talk about the corporate venture capital, they have requirements. They have to be very innovative and very venturing. It means that the risk hedging is needed when we have the policies or the businesses in here. And also decision making should be very agile and free. So if we have the regulations made for this kind of corporate venture businesses, I'm very optimistic because I already witnessed a lot of other good news like regulatory sandbox and so on. One thing we have to further incorporate is the corporate venture capitals. That's something we have to think about in the future. Thank you. About Mr. Yoon from the Ministry of Economy and Finance. For the startup in Korea, I know that the government has been doing a lot, but do you have any more to do or anything else that you can comment more? Yeah, I'll be very brief. I'll be briefer, actually. So recently, because of the COVID-19, the investment volume has been gone down. I know that the difficulties have been experienced by the startup companies. Therefore, it is necessary to have the changes in the regulation. I agree with that. And also CVC, corporate venture capital, as you mentioned, is also something that we can think about. In the past, we had the Capital Markets Act that the business and the bank should be separated, but that kind of renovation or changes have been announced by the government as well. Therefore, in order to stimulate the venture businesses, there is a need for more capital to be invested in. There should be more pools to be used as a fund. So that's kind of agreement. In order to make a very good virtuous cycle, there should be a series of deregulations and also helping regulations and so on. Therefore, the focus of the government is that we have to have a good foundation for the private sector venture capital as well. So government should be working as a priming water, and the capital can flow freely into the private sector as well. So there is a role to be played by the government as an intervener. And also recently, we have the non-tech business or non-contact businesses. So in this regard, we can explore new startup businesses relation to this kind of on-tech businesses. That's another focus that the government is making. One more thing from me is that regarding the support of the venture businesses by the government, the demand and supply issue is very important. So when we have the policies, we have some considerations that have been made so far. So you can witness it and we can see it or read it from the digital new deal policy by the government. It means the vulnerable companies like SMEs or small companies, AI solution vouchers can be issued for them, or some kind of vouchers that can be replaced with their systems can be issued as well. And also the work from home vouchers can be released for those small and medium-sized companies. But demand and supply is needed. So I'm sure that already we have demands fully comparable to supply as well. Therefore, if this policy is in place, all the SMEs can be benefited. And also in the case of ventures and startups, these kind of new businesses will be effective. So it will be welcomed by the users and also the implementers as well. So in order to implement the capability build up, that will be also very good, and also that will just increase the revenue as well. I told you that I'm not a good timekeeper today. I know that we have to spend some time for the Q&As from the audience as well, but I'm worried about that as well. So let's just go around among ourselves to have a very short comment, the last comment. While you are doing that, I'm going to read the list of questions from the audience. I'm going to pick just some of them. You don't have to answer all of the questions I read. Just lastly, you are going to just answer some of the questions. Let's read the questions first before you think about answers. We have various types of questions here from the audience. We have a question regarding India. India is a very big country in terms of population. They have great potential upside. What kind of policies are they making? That's one question. The second question is about the marginalized policies. What kind of new policies can be made for the elderly and the disabled? And the third question is about the job creation. What kind of policies are made by the government? What is the speed of it? So these are some of the questions I read for you. So just having heard that, you might answer those questions, or you might add something that you didn't answer. So I'm going to give 1 minute each of you. Let's start with Mr. Makridis. Then he will be followed by Mr. Gupta,
Great.
Then we will
So
go to Mr. Yoon, and the last will Mr. An. Mr. Macridis, please, first.
Okay, well, I'll probably tackle the question about marginalized groups. When we think about how technology has potentially heterogeneous effects, automation can certainly lead to larger layoffs in certain areas, but the advent of personalized learning or just more democratized learning can have very beneficial effects. One of the research papers that I'm working on with a good friend and colleague, Renee Kizelchek at Cornell University, we use all individuals that are part of Data Camp, and we look at how online learning and the degree to which people have been utilizing the technology changed over the pandemic. And we look at how zip codes that are lower income versus higher income behaved over the past 6 months. And one of our results was that it seems like there is this very democratizing effect. Now, 1 minute doesn't do this full justice, but it's just to say that I think it's going to be essential for us to think about how to get technologies out there in a democratized fashion so that each person can be empowered to learn and acquire new skills rather than just to be laid off and then given welfare. So there's a better way out there, and I think that these learning technologies are the best way of accomplishing that. But it was a pleasure to participate. Thank you so much.
네, 미스터부터
Yeah.
부탁드리겠습니다.
Yeah.
Mr.
So,
Gupta, please.
my quick response is that yes, India is a very diverse country. We have more than 23 official languages. We speak maybe 500 different dialects, and the lessons from India, which I teach globally, are that if you can solve a problem in India, which has different income levels, very very diverse income levels, very very different education and literacy levels, very very different spoken languages. If you can solve a problem for this, for India as diverse as India, you can probably apply that problem to the rest of the world. And there is a lesson for startups in that. So, how fast can you scale and speed and at a very, very frugal and a cost level, which is very, very beside. So that's number one. Number two, I think Christian has already talked about the reskilling for marginalized. I will just like to make a point that one of the big things that digital technologies have to do is to make ease of life for seniors. And the only way to do that is to ensure that what pensions, what schemes that they have earned for themselves throughout their life is now easily made available. Simple thing as proof of life, they have to give every 6 months or 12 months to keep availing their pensions, should be at home service. They should not be should be required to step out of their home, and a digital identity can enable that. And that is exactly what we do in India. So I know we are short of time, so thank you very much for having me here and sharing our thoughts. It's been a great learning experience.
네, 감사합니다. 안희재 판사님.
Thank you very much, Mr. An. I believe that the Korean society should need to see a difference in the timing of embracing this digital, a perspective in embracing the digital transformation. So this is something that is inevitable. So instead of actually having fear or be concerned about it, we have to really think about how to minimize its negative impact. So if we discuss further in terms of the process and the details of the digital transformation, I believe that we need to further actually elaborate more on the discussions and make our discussions more specific and concrete so that we can minimize the negative impacts of digital transformation. And I hope that today's forum can be the occasion.
Well, thank you very much. Well, let me continue my ideas about the job issues. With the COVID-19 and also the innovation of digital transformation, we know that there must be many of the marginalized people. So we have long-term policy and short-term policy by the government. For the people who are stricken in the job creation, we can provide some grants or the subsidies for the employment stabilization. That is kind of short-term relief. That's one thing. But in the long run, these isolated people should have some capabilities upscaled in order to adapt themselves into the new technology society. That's another thing we can do. Thank you very much. Well,
굉장히 길게 이야기하고 싶지만 저에게 주어진 시간이
Thank you very much, our panelists. So now we're up with the time. So I would like to now bring this discussion to an end. I hope that we'll be able to have more concrete discussions in the following sessions. Once again, thank you very much, our 4 panelists, for joining us today. And although we don't have a lot of audience physically present, I'm sure that all our virtual audience will give a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much, and goodbye. I would like to wrap up the session here. Yes, so we actually looked at the economy and the future of the digital transformation and the policy, and we were able to have in-depth discussions regarding this topic during this session. Once again, thank you very much, all our panelists, for your insights and input. So we're going to leverage all of the insights that were provided to develop innovations and policies and that can be employed around the world.